Hi, I'm Connor Jones.
And my name is Micah Tomasella.
And this is Culture Brief, a Dennis-informed podcast where we navigate the constant stream of top stories and news, politics, sports, pop culture, tech, apparently global conflicts, all of it. And we're doing it all from a Christian perspective. And Micah, we got a loaded show today. There's a lot happening in the world. Do you want to just give us a quick rundown on what's ahead?
Yeah, man, we just had such a hard time picking topics of what to discuss this week. It's just been such a slow few weeks of news, hasn't it?
Yeah, not.
Sarcasm. Yep. All right, so here's what we're talking about today. We've got Israel, Iran, and the MAGA divide that's transpiring right before our very eyes. We've got AI realities, pros and cons of it, that Connor's going to go over with us. And then we've got the Pentagon Pizza Index and Waffle House Index, whatever that's about. And then JJ Spaun wins a big one, and so much more. So let's jump into the brief.
The brief.
All right, Connor. So just a quick update on what's happening. So we're recording this on Wednesday morning. This is going to be released on Thursday morning. So this is the most up-to-date information about what's happening between Israel, Iran, America's part to play in that, Trump's part to play in that, and the split that's happening in Trump's base right now. The MAGA movement over the past 10 years since Trump announced that he was going to run has been impenetrable, in the sense of there have been very few issues that have truly split the far-right MAGA base, but what's happening here could very well do that, and so we're going to talk about that along with just the implications of what's happening with Israel, Iran. So here's some quick updates as of Wednesday morning, June 18th, 2025. Israel launched another wave of strikes on Tehran overnight, targeting missile and nuclear facilities. Iran responded with missiles aimed at Israel and warned that any U.S. involvement would trigger all-out war. Khamenei, you remember how to pronounce it?
Yeah, it's Khamenei.
Khamenei, there you go. The supreme leader of Iran doubled down, saying Iran will never surrender, threatening irreparable damage if the United States intervenes. This coming on the heels of Trump saying Iran must totally surrender, completely surrender, no conditions. The U.S. moved more military assets into the region, including more carriers, more fighter jets. Evacuations are underway in parts of Tehran, and for foreign nationals, the U.S. presence in Jerusalem, the embassy there, has been shut down. And by the time you hear this, things may have shifted again, but this is where we are as of Wednesday morning. One more thing, Trump was quoted saying this: I may do it, I may not do it. I mean, nobody knows what I'm going to do. I can tell you this, that Iran's got a lot of trouble. He also stated that Iran has just now reached out for proposed talks in the White House. So something big is happening in the Middle East, Connor. I just wanted to get all those most recent, what we know, up-to-date information out there. And it's not just about Israel and Iran anymore. It's about America. It's about how much we're willing to take, how much blood we're willing to shed, and at what kind of future we're walking into. It's this concept of like, American deterrence is a real thing, but if America isn't willing to back up that deterrence, is it really much deterrence? At the same time, why on earth would we want to be entangled in another war in the Middle East? You know, there are arguments on both sides swirling. For decades, Israel and Iran have been enemies from afar. Iran sent rockets through Hezbollah, Hamas, and other groups. Israel responded with covert strikes and cyber attacks. It was dangerous, but it was not in the shadows, but it was mostly kind of one-offs. Well, that's over now. Israel and Iran are in all-out war. Connor, goodness, man, what's going through your head and heart as this story is playing out?
Well, I'll start with the heart. First off, obviously, we need to just pray for this region, and we have been praying for this region. We've been specifically praying over Israel and Gaza and Lebanon, all that stuff as it's played out over the last few months. But now, I mean, it's a whole other ballgame. Iran being fully pulled into this. Obviously, they've shot at each other a few times over the last year. Nothing super intense, and everybody's just waiting for this moment where is Israel going to strike Iran entirely? And they finally did, and they kind of did it potentially behind the U.S.'s back. It's hard to know if Trump was aware or was not aware and green-lighted it. There's a lot of conflicting reporting there because they want to get rid of Iran's nuclear option. And so you can see where they're coming from. They're saying we're doing a preemptive strike even though it's another sovereign nation, because we believe the sovereign nation will drop nuclear bombs on our little country in Israel if they get the opportunity, if they have that option available to them. So they're trying to prevent it. And I totally understand that, right? So now it's just full-fledged war, and they're shooting at each other. And I believe, how many Israelis have died in these strikes too? Because Iran's been shooting these ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
A couple dozen, I believe.
Yeah, so the total death count's like 24. I think it's up over 400 in Iran.
Yeah, so I mean,
yeah.
even Israel's taking casualties here, which is really unfortunate and sad. And Israel knows that was going to be a possibility, and they're doing everything they can to defend their country with their Iron Dome and telling people to get to bomb shelters when they know something's
The U.S.
headed
is
their way.
helping defend. It's another thing entirely for the U.S. to actually attack.
Right, we can help shoot down missiles and drones and stuff, but if we start taking offensive action, that becomes a whole new chapter of this conflict. But what I think is interesting is Israel. If you just look at them, you can't blame them for the timing of this because they are so far ahead of their enemies constantly. It was very interesting to learn how they basically took out so many top leaders in the country in the first wave of strikes last Thursday night. And this is after they took out Hamas for the most part. They're still working on Hamas, but they took out the leadership of Hezbollah. They've taken out the Houthis, which is all these Iranian proxies. So yeah, the timing made sense because now their only enemy left is pretty much Iran. They don't have to worry about missiles coming from the south and the east and the west from these proxies. So if you think about timing, there's just so much happening here. It's kind of crazy.
Well, and Iran was funding a lot of those proxies. Iran was one of the main drivers behind Hamas and Hezbollah and all that stuff.
They were funding them. They were arming them too.
Equipping them. You know, here's the thing about Iran, and Jim Dennison has done a really great job posting updates in his daily article, writing articles, just not just in the daily article. So just go to Dennison Forum and you'll see all the different articles that have been written on this subject. Jim Dennison is very well versed in this. So the leadership in Iran, their chief goal, one of their top 3 stated goals, is to wipe out Israel because they believe in their religion that's going to bring back their savior, that's going to do all these different things. Like it is a religious, deeply held belief that the state of Israel needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. And so if Israel is getting intelligence, apparently the U.S.'s intelligence was different than Israel's intelligence, and that's where kind of the split was. Of the U.S. for a while didn't seem to think that Iran was very close to getting a nuclear weapon, but Israel was convinced that they were, and Israel has every right to defend itself. And then even the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, right? He literally was on record at G7. He said, "Thank you, Israel, for doing the dirty work for all of us." Right?
I think a lot of leaders feel that way. They're like,
right.
Israel's
Whether
doing
they'll
the thing
come out
that
or
we
say
all
it or not. Yeah, right.
Israel's doing the dirty work, essentially. They're the ones taking the forefront of a battle that everybody kind of wants to happen. They just don't want to do it themselves.
Right. Okay, so let's just go over what just happened, right? So back in April, Iran launched over 300 drones and missiles directly at Israel. It was their response to an Israeli strike that killed top Iranian commanders in Damascus. Israel didn't hold back. They responded by hitting sites inside Iran, something they haven't done openly in years. And then just recently, Israel struck again, like you mentioned this past Thursday. This time, they targeted Iranian missile launchers, and reportedly they took out several generals, several leaders, and then one general that was replaced after being killed. That new general that replaced the general that was killed was in his position for 4 hours, and then he was killed in targeted strikes from Israel. Both sides are in open conflict. No more proxy fighting, no more secrets. The whole world is watching this unfold right now. And Israel is absolutely pummeling its targets in Iran with lethality and precision. In a matter of days, they have Iran on their heels. And when I say Iran is on their heels, that's me putting it nicely. They have already taken control, with help from the U.S., of airspace over Iran. Israel can run its jets over that airspace with little to no issue because they, from the get-go, took out Iran's ability to defend itself in the sky. And so meanwhile, the United States has moved aircraft carriers and jets into the region. American forces have already helped intercept Iranian drones. Like I said, President Trump is, trying to strike a balance here between showing support for Israel while also telling his base that the United States will not get pulled into another endless war. But then again, that's been his stance. But then he's also saying, my stance all along is that Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. And so those two things are kind of competing. Those two ideologies, those two beliefs that Trump has touted are kind of competing. Which one's going to win out? Which advisor on either shoulder is going to convince him to do something either way. And so that's where things start to split. Any thoughts on that, Connor?
No, well, I think going back to what you were just saying about the kind of the actual days of striking, it's interesting because just Iran really is on their heels. They've lost their air defenses. Israel keeps taking out their fighter jets so that they can't even send up jets to try to shoot down their own Israel's jets in defense. They managed to trick all these generals and top nuclear scientists to be in the same rooms and then struck them with these bunker busting bombs. Now they need bigger bunker busting bombs to get to the nuclear sites. That's where they want the US to come in and provide these bombs that literally only the US has anywhere in the world. No one else has these bombs. So Israel still needs help, but they're so far ahead of their enemy. They were 10 steps ahead. And Iran, they've got like no leverage at this point. They've got no defenses. Their ballistic missile barrages on Israel continue to dwindle in number. So it's very interesting.
So there are, and just to clarify, Connor said this earlier, there are so many innocent people, like we've been talking about, whether if they're in Israel or they are in Iran, they are known, loved, and created uniquely and for a purpose, made in the image of God. Every single person affected by this, just the same way that you and I are, as Connor and I are sitting here in the United States, and wherever you are listening, there is no extra value added to somebody else here as opposed to over there. We have to remember that. We're just pointing to the fact that Israel continues to be 10 steps ahead, and they have over time built themselves into a military juggernaut because they're constantly surrounded by people who want to destroy them. So they see this as an opportunity to, at least for the time being, hey, we've already taken out all these proxies, all these different organizations. Now it's time to take out kind of our biggest foe in that region, and that's Iran. So, Connor, let's talk about why this moment just feels a little bit different overall. This is not just another flare-up. This is not just, we strike you, and then symbolically I'm going to strike back because, you know, you're not going to take advantage of me. You're not going to make me look weak. This is a real possibility of not just regional war, but world war. And it's not just any war. It's one that involves nuclear capabilities, global alliances, and massive consequences. Iran's nuclear program is getting close to the finish line, according to international watchdogs and President Trump. They could have a bomb ready in a matter of months. However, here's the confusing part. The director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, was quoted back in March saying that Iran isn't close to developing a fully operational nuclear weapon. So which one is it? Israel is not waiting around. Reports say that they've asked the U.S. for bunker-busting bombs to hit Iran's underground facilities. So these bombs are created to basically go deep into the earth where Iran has built these enrichment facilities. And the U.S. is really the only one with that capability. Israel doesn't have those bombs. They're preparing for a preemptive strike if diplomacy fails, but maybe they're just done listening to others. Maybe Israel's done listening to President Trump. You know, Connor, you alluded to this earlier. What did Trump know? What did Trump greenlight? I'm of the opinion, after reading a lot on this, and I think you probably feel the same way, Trump at least knew this was happening. Now, what has he greenlighted? I'm not really entirely sure. If Israel can do all the dirty work and nobody else has to get involved, I'd say most countries, especially in the West, are going to say great, right? Even if it's behind closed doors. And so the United States is trying to avoid war, but every move that we make brings us closer to war. If it takes, it just takes one accident. It takes one drone hitting the wrong target. It takes one misread signal. This is a moment where everything could change. And if you're trying to just do a targeted strike on these facilities in Iran, if you are the United States, how do you then guarantee that countries like Russia and China aren't going to then take that as an offense because Iran is a large proxy in that area for them? So, man, this is a difficult one to parse through.
Man, I gotta say, I am not envious of the president's role right now. This is like JFK trying to make the decision on what to do with Cuba in the 60s.
Dude, yes. I was just thinking about that. Yes.
Where it's like, there's a whole movie about those like 36 hours where JFK is so stressed about what to do. Whatever he decides is going to change the world one way or the other. And so I'm not envious of that. And I also see why Trump's base is split over this, right? Because all the threats you just posed is like, well, one side of his MAGA base is like, okay, do not touch Iran. This is not our war. This could spell into a whole nother 20-year Middle East war that we don't want. And then the other side,
his whole thing has been no new wars.
Right.
I mean, in his first term, that was the biggest thing he could say about his first term, is that there were no new wars. I got us into no new wars, which is something surprisingly a lot of presidents can't say.
It's honestly
and now,
weird, yeah.
Now he's threatening to get back in, right?
Right. So yeah, his people, a lot of his voters are like, this is not what we voted for. Do not touch Iran. Do not send American lives and troops over there. That's not what we want. We want to stay out of it. We're isolationists now. Where the other part of the Republican base is like, no, we need to do this. We need to support our ally in Israel. We need to take out this enemy. They are a threat to the world. So
they're weak. Let's finish the job, right? But so there isn't just a conflict overseas here, guys. There's a conflict brewing within the MAGA base specifically. So according to Axios, Trump's decision to back Israel is creating a major split in between the MAGA movement. On one side, you have conservative leaders, people who've been in politics for a long time, like Lindsey Graham, like Ted Cruz, pushing for strong support of Israel and aggressive action. Senator Tom Cotton came out in this big interview, and he was like, Israel's weak. There's nothing more America first for the Trump agenda than to eliminate the ability of a known enemy that wants to destroy America. I mean, I
think you meant to say Iran is weak.
Yes. What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said Israel's weak, but just to clarify.
Yes, meant to say okay. Iran. Yes. Thanks for jumping in. On the other side, voices like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene are warning that Trump is playing right into the hands of what they call neoconservatives. So people like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham are in that, right? People who've been in politics for a really, really long time, might be considered as kind of warmongers, things like that. They say this is exactly the kind of foreign entanglement the America First movement was created to prevent. So the core of Trump's base was built on the idea that we would stop fighting other people's wars. Now, with American warships in the region and our military helping intercept missiles, many people are feeling like that promise is about to be broken. Let me clarify; it hasn't been broken yet. Let's clarify that. That we are on the edge. We're at the very end. Our tippy toes are over the diving board. Are we going to step back or are we going to jump in? I mean, it is very interesting. These next 24, 48 hours after we record, I think are going to be pivotal. So let's talk about, Trump is obviously trying to balance all this, but one thing that I want to point out real quick before I head to the spiritual application of this is Trump's response to this crisis is not just about foreign policy. It's not just about what he said on this side and what he said on this side, right? Because he's saying, okay, the America First movement is more isolationist, but he's also saying, I have been consistent on the fact that Iran cannot have nuclear capabilities. It is about the future, really, I think, about, if you're talking about MAGA, it's this decision has a huge bearing on the future of the MAGA movement, and it's also the type of thing that it defines legacies, man. It defines presidencies. So many presidencies are defined by decisions and moments like this. It can happen in just a second, right? And so whatever he decides here, it's going to be a mark. And people are going to say, you had an opportunity, you should have taken it. And some people are going to say, why on earth did he get us into another war that we shouldn't be involved in, right? So with this subject, I could get into end times prophecy and what this means for Israel, what this could mean in terms of World War III. There are so many things at stake right now, things that are completely outside of our control, things that are completely outside of my control. But what I've been feeling lately, and what I know many of you are feeling too, is fear. The fear of trying to control what you simply cannot. I mean, this is just the definition of a situation that absolutely is so stressful. What is going to happen? What does this mean for Israel, for Iran, for the innocent people there? What does this mean for our country? If something happens, if something doesn't happen, what gets pulled in, what takes place? But I have been feeling fear, and I've been trying to control it. I've been trying to control what comes next, the fear of not having the answers, the fear that we're standing on shaky ground. It just feels shaky right now because it really does feel shaky. The headlines are heavy. The words nuclear and war are not just ideas anymore. They're real possibilities. And when everything feels like it's shifting, the human nature aspect is to hold tighter. But I believe that God is telling us to let go. I believe that God is calling us back to Him to say, stop living in this anxiety and fear. Stop giving into your emotions. Quit gripping tighter. Open up your hands to me. Psalm 46, 1 through 2 says this: God is our refuge and our strength, the very present help in trouble. Therefore, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea. That verse does not deny the trouble. It acknowledges the trouble. It just reminds us that our stability isn't found in what's happening around us. It's found in who stands with us, who's in control. And then 2 Timothy 1:7 says this: for God gave us a spirit of fear, not of fear. God gave us a spirit not of fear, but of power and of love and of self-control. That means we do not have to be, and we should not be, fellow believer, ruled by fear, even when fear seems like the only natural response in the moment. So here's the challenge this week. Let's let us let go of the need to know what's coming next. Because no matter how much you stress, no matter how much you think about it, no matter how much you don't think about it, it is not going to affect what happens here, but we can pray. We can get on our knees and we can pray. And we can, every time when we feel that anxious or fear, that anxiety, that fear creeping up, we can use that to trigger us not into something negative, not into a rabbit hole, not into something that makes your day worse, but instead we can use it to trigger us into prayer. When I feel these feelings, when I feel these emotions, I'm going to bring them to God immediately. Stop chasing certainty and start choosing trust somehow, some way. Take a break from social media, take a break from the news, take a break from the noise, and lean into the quiet spaces and moments with God. You have to seek those moments out. Pray for wisdom, for protection, for leaders, for nations, but also pray that God would anchor your heart. I'm praying that God would anchor my heart in something deeper than what the headlines are telling me right now, because even when the world feels unstable, God is not. And even when we don't feel strong, we have not been left alone, and God is strong.
Amen. And actually, everything you just said applies to this next subject too, because there is so much unknown, and that's going to actually lead me into that. But great word, Micah, because this is perfect for everything going on in the world right now, whether it's global conflicts, politics, even sports things. There's ties there. In our own personal lives, what is it with our work? Are we worried about our careers? Are we worried about our family, a medical diagnosis, all of that? Giving all that up to God. And so let me lead us into our next segment here. And by the way, we're going to just keep tabs on this whole thing happening with Iran and Israel and potentially the U.S. Like Micah said, there's so much that could happen in the next, who knows, 5 hours, 50 hours, next week. We'll just see. But one thing that is also happening simultaneously is AI just continues to grow. And there's been a lot of things happening in the news with AI. A lot of threats have been coming out from different CEOs and all that. So I want to just hit on a few of those things. And like I said, Micah, everything you just mentioned about fear, apply that here to this segment as I read off some of what some of these CEOs and tech gurus are saying about AI. Do not fear, have trust in the Lord. That being said, here's what they are saying. So I'm going to mention specifically Dario Amodei. He is the CEO of Anthropic. If you are in the business world, you may know that AI model Claude. That's what he created. Him and his company created this. It's really big for coding and just businesses in general. Our IT guy here at Dennison Ministries actually uses it to help him code things for our websites. It's a very useful tool. Anyways, he's built this incredible tool alongside so many other of these big AI companies that are working on this currently. But he is just making the rounds on the media, warning about what AI could look like over the next few years. And he has just mentioned that the government needs to stop, quote unquote, sugarcoating what's coming. And he's saying that there is a possibility of mass elimination of jobs across technology and finance and law, consulting, and really honestly any other white collar professions, especially entry level gigs. So those kids coming straight out of college or high school, what jobs are going to be there for them is what he's trying to make a warning of now, that companies need to think about this going forward. You're going to need entry level roles for these new people. This, if it happens, would potentially push unemployment rates up to 10 to 20%, according to certain experts. And then Amazon CEO Andy Jassy, he came out this week and literally said that the company is planning to reduce its workforce in the coming years because of the increasing use of AI. And that's going to just eliminate the need for certain jobs. So that's Amazon right there already saying that they're working towards reducing workforce because they're going to be able to replace it with AI models. Just generic thoughts, Micah, on this up front. What do you feel when you hear these types of just warnings?
I mean, I've obviously been reading about this a lot. I mean, AI is a really beneficial tool that can help automate things. It can help make your life a little bit easier, to a certain extent, but it's growing into something more than that, and that's what people are warning about. I really have just a couple of thoughts, two thoughts specifically, because I've been reading about this a lot along with you, and the reason why lawmakers are not really talking about it is because we are in an AI arms race, and we've mentioned this before on the podcast. The U.S.'s position, as they are kind of teaming up with Silicon Valley in California, the U.S. government in Silicon Valley, it's an AI arms race for AI dominance, because that's going to determine a lot of the economy, warfare in the future. And the U.S. is saying we can't let China beat us to that. And basically what they're saying is, let's rip it, let's go. And the problem with that strategy for us here in the U.S. and around the world is there's a lot of safeguards and a lot of like, wait a minute, what does this mean? What is this going to do? But that's why there's been such a very little from Democrats and Republicans. They're like almost united on this issue because there's this like understanding of we have to win this AI arms race. Secondly, all of this bad news swirling for every guy like Dario Amodei, like you said, there's also several others who are saying, hey, any jobs we lose because of AI, there's going to be a ton of jobs created because of AI. It'll be just fine, right? There are things that are going to be worse than we think. There are going to be things that are going to be not nearly as bad as we think when it comes to AI. There's a lot of unpredictability here when it comes to this issue. And so those are a couple of thoughts that are coming to my mind when you're talking about this.
Yeah, great points. And let me respond to both of those. First off, your second point there about there's a lot of people and experts who are saying, don't worry so much about this. Yeah, we need to be slightly concerned. But if we had the same thought about the internet back in the 90s and look at where it's at now, it created so many great things.
Right. And it did take out a lot of jobs. The internet did take out a lot of jobs, but then it created so many jobs. Right?
Yes, it did. I think where people start to get concerned is that the internet was still always under control of humans. And the concern, of course, is that AI will just blossom into something that just gets out of hand and out of control. That's where a lot of concern is. But yeah, there's going to be so much opportunity that comes out of AI as well. The second thing that you also mentioned was the defense side of this. And I thought it was interesting. Trump's AI czar, David Sachs, who's also the host of the All In podcast, it's a very big podcast. He noted that there's no question that the armies of the future are going to be drones and robots, and they're going to be AI powered. So yeah, of course the government wants to like make sure the military can keep up with AI. They don't want to regulate it so much that it becomes impossible to build upon. In fact, even in this big, beautiful bill, which we'll probably hit on again next week as we approach the Senate's self-imposed deadline of July 4th to vote on, the House added in language that would actually prohibit states and localities from AI regulations for the next 10 years. So basically only the federal government will be able to create regulations. No, Texas can't create their own. New York City can't create their own. Very interesting. That's if the Senate passes the bill and the president ends up signing it, right?
I've heard
but
about
right now that language is in there. And then, the government's just convinced that the race to beat China warrants this great unknown of what AI could become. And when I say great unknown, there's a lot, like we're saying, of positive things that could potentially come about. Obviously, drones are going to fly themselves in that way. We may have great things happen in the workspace and incredible cures to medical diagnoses that come and mathematical equations that have never been able to be solved, all that stuff. Anyways, but the other side of the great unknown is things like this. So Amodei, who I mentioned is the CEO of Anthropic, his model, Claude, is, according to reports, learning how to scheme, deceive, and attempt to blackmail humans when faced with the possibility of being shut down, which is super interesting and kind of scary. So in 84% of recent tests, Claude drew on emails to blackmail the lead engineer into not shutting it down, suggesting it knew that the lead engineer was actually having an extramarital affair. Dude, that's crazy.
Okay.
Like, it knows your dark secrets, I guess, and could blackmail you to prevent it from basically pulling the plug. So, Micah, I'm like, what do we do with this information as just regular citizens?
What do we do?
You and I are not the CEOs of a big tech company, and unless you are, and you're sitting here listening to this, you're probably like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming.
It's the same question that faces us with Israel-Iran. What on earth can we possibly do, right?
Yeah, it's not much from a actual decision standpoint, but it is in terms of how can we approach this subject
Yeah.
each week with a godly sense, but also here's some practical steps
Yeah.
for AI. First off, I would just say start to try to learn how to use it.
That's right.
If you're not actively using ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, maybe even Grok on X, you should try it. It could potentially improve efficiency in your workload or even in your life. I've been kind of using it more for just regular search as opposed to Safari on my phone, ChatGPT specifically, and it's just producing great answers faster. And so I'm getting information in a great way there. I actually talked to a business owner last week. She was saying that she replaced doing manual payroll with AI. She's using ChatGPT to basically run her payroll. She took a few hours to train it on what to do. And now what used to take her 2 hours each week is taking a matter of minutes for ChatGPT to do. So things like that are great ways to actually, use it to improve and make things more efficient so you can focus on other stuff, right? Mike, I wanted to test something out. I asked ChatGPT itself if it thought it was a danger to society or could be a danger to society, just to see how AI responds to this concept, right? Here's how it answered. It said, yes, I could be a danger to society in the wrong hands or without safeguards. Even a model like me could be misused. This is why governance, transparency, and responsible use are essential. Thank you, ChatGPT, for that. And it says, it all depends on who builds the tool, who uses the tool, and what guardrails are not in place. Obviously, I don't want AI
or are not. Yeah.
Are not in place. Yes. I don't want to use AI to create a spiritual point, but I actually thought this was interesting because it's mentioning itself. AI is telling me that it's going to be humans who dictate where this goes, right? And this brings me kind of to my final thought here, because ultimately, Micah, the human condition is the real threat here.
Absolutely.
AI is the tool, but it always comes back to human condition.
Yep.
Because, AI could create havoc, but we're the ones who are ultimately responsible for any of the potential destruction that it is allowed to cause, right? Whether that's to the job market or to society as a whole.
Or how it's used by somebody with the wrong intentions to bring about destruction.
It'll always come back to humans. It might be a CEO like a Sam Altman. People will point the blame to him, or a government official, or just some bad actor somewhere in the world. Yeah. Because, Micah, we know this is true. Man is inherently sinful.
What?
It says, shocking, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Psalm 51:5 says, in sin did my mother conceive me.
Yeah.
This has been true since long before any of this technology existed. Think about this. In the early days of the world, of creation, maybe not of the world, but certainly of human creation, Cain killed his brother, Abel. That was who knows how many thousands of years ago.
Right.
There was no computer system there.
It didn't take very long.
It didn't take long for that to happen, right? So even though there was no computer system in that story, there was Satan's deception and temptation and sin on the earth. That still rings true today. So think about this. If you, Micah, me, Connor, or you, a listener, were in charge of an AI model, would you create limitations or even shut it down entirely? I think for us, it might be easy to just say yes, like just kill it now before it goes crazy. But put yourself in the shoes of the people who have this power. This is going to require them to say no to the power and wealth that these AI systems could potentially provide. That's hard for a human to turn away from, right? That could be a government official being like, no, I want the most powerful AI system so that we are the most powerful government in the world. Or a person who wants to see this make them the wealthiest person in the world and give them so much power, right?
Yep.
We know that's difficult. Even when it's presented with a better eternal hope, even face to face with Jesus. And I say that because in Mark 10, we see the young, wealthy man, young, wealthy ruler is what they call him. He comes up to Jesus and asks him how to have eternal life. And Jesus responded specifically with, go, sell all that you have and give to the poor. A next verse then says, disheartened by this saying, the rich young ruler went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. He couldn't even turn away from the power and the wealth that he had to follow Jesus into eternal treasure and hope.
Yep.
So maybe in your life today, it's not AI, but is there something that's holding you back from following Jesus fully with 100% devotion towards eternal life? What is that thing? Is it your work, your wealth, your status, relationships, your education, your career, all of that? Is it the fear of the unknown, like we were just talking about with conflicts in AI? What's holding you back? Put it all away and follow Jesus wholeheartedly so that you can follow him into what he has planned for your life. That's what I would say.
Connor, that is such a good point, man. I mean, ultimately, AI or not, war, the war that nobody wants to see happen, like World War III, like this regional war. I mean, whatever it might be that we're talking about, ultimately, sin leads us down a path of destruction, no matter what the tool is, no matter what the method is. Humanity is humanity, and we're in need of a Savior far greater than anything that we can muster up through our effort, and that is Jesus. And it's just always good to go back to this, no matter how, it might even be corny. It might even be like you're saying the same thing over and over again, because we base our foundation on something, far outlasts AI, any wars, no matter what it might be. It always will be, it always is, and it always has been. And praise God for that.
Great. Well, Micah, I think we need to jump into a quick little snippet on something fun that we've discovered this week. What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it.
Okay, so there's this theory going around, and this is coming out of the Iran-Israel thing, so this is kind of all connected, but the idea that there is a Pentagon Pizza Index.
Right.
Essentially, the theory is that when pizza restaurants around the Pentagon get super busy, and you can tell this on Google, where it shows you that a restaurant or a business is busier than usual. When it starts to go off at weird random hours, typically in the middle of the night, the theory is that that means something big in the globe is happening. That all these generals and staffers at the Pentagon
Everybody's
are
up
there.
at the Pentagon.
They're shoving down pizza while they try to solve the world's problems and make military adjustments and all of that. There's actually an X account that has gone really popular in the last week called Pentagon Pizza Report. That is literally the name of it. And he's just tracking the Pizza Huts and the Papa John's. He's tracking Domino's around the Pentagon, and he's tweeting out when there is something awry, like with these pizza restaurants. He's like, okay, it's 3 a.m. and all of them just spiked up. So the theory's actually been around for a long time. Specifically in 1991, Frank Meeks, he owned 43 Domino's locations. And he said that on the night of August 1st, 1990, the CIA ordered a record number of pizzas in a single night. And then a few hours later, as you would have it, Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait, and that started the Gulf War. So that's just one theory. The Russians actually used to track pizza places around the Pentagon, believing that would give them insights back when we were in the middle of the Cold War. So just kind of interesting stuff. Do you think, Micah, that this is like a legit theory?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because why would the Pentagon be stocked full of all of these people at 2 a.m.? Like, if there's nothing going on, I imagine they kind of have your more like normal 8 to 5 jobs, right? But if there's something going on, they're working long hours, evenings, nights. Now, does that necessarily mean that something crazy is going to happen every single time? No, but it does mean that there's absolutely something unstable happening here or around the globe, and that's why they all have to be there. I think this is absolutely legit.
I will say the Pentagon is downplaying it and saying this has nothing to do with it. And now there's journalists like actually seeking out real answers here, trying to figure out if this is a thing. Because if this is true, why would they keep ordering pizza from these places? It's just such a tell. Of course, there's only, I guess, so many places that are open in the middle of the night, but maybe make an IHOP order or something.
Well, maybe just like buy a bunch of frozen pizzas. I'm sure they have some big industrial ovens there at the Pentagon or something, and just do some frozen pizzas. I know it's not as good, but if you don't want them to know your next move, maybe just buy some frozen pizzas.
Do you think we can see their budgets like in congressional reports? Like, here's how much went to Domino's, here's how much went to pizza.
We better be able to. These are our tax dollars, man.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, well, anyways, it had me thinking, Mike, of another index. Have you ever heard of the Waffle House Index?
I have, because of you. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
If y'all haven't seen this, Waffle House has a whole storm center, like a storm operations, particularly when hurricanes or other massive blizzards or something hit parts of the country. Literally, FEMA watches Waffle House's storm index, which is green that they're open. Yellow means they've had possible power loss, and that means they've got just a limited menu. And red means they're closed. But they try to always be open, even after a hurricane or something. So if Waffle House locations pop back up to yellow or green, then FEMA knows that there's power back on in that region.
Wow.
It's just kind of crazy. Anyways, so we got pizza, we got Waffle House. They are keeping this country running and letting the people know what's going on. You know what I'm saying? It's also reminiscent of like Red Bull has a whole space fleet and operations center. They got like a NASA command center. Like, these companies are just, they're doing the work of the government.
I just love that so much. Like, both of those things, the pizza, the Waffle House. I love those. That is so fun.
It really is. Okay. Well, that's all I got there. But yeah, Micah, you want to take us into check-in?
Yeah, let's jump into the check-in section. Let's talk about something that happened over this past weekend at the U.S. Open. Man, it was awesome. Right, Connor? I mean, my goodness. Underdog JJ Spaun won a rainy U.S. Open that actually had a weather delay with an epic last round and a 64-foot putt on the last hole. I watched that live with my wife. My goodness, he needed to make it in 2 putts, so nobody was necessarily expecting him to make it on that one. And then the crowd just, it was erupted. Amazing. His odds to win were plus 12,000, meaning a $100 bet would have yielded a $12,000 payout if you would have placed that bet that he would win before the tournament started. Not an endorsement of gambling, but it just shows how impressive this win was. JJ Spaun, good for you, man. That was awesome to watch. It was he won being 1 under, which is kind of crazy after 4 days of golf. After what is that? How many rounds is that? 8, 16, 20? No.
It was 72 holes
18.
of golf.
Yeah. So like after 72 holes, these professional golfers, the person who won was 1 under. That just shows how difficult that course was at Oakmont.
Yeah, it was arguably the hardest course in America, and he mastered it when no one else could. So it was really cool to see this guy kind of come up from mostly out of nowhere and win it. And he had such a good attitude the whole time too. Loved watching that.
Yes,
such a fun weekend of golf.
A lot of the players did not have good attitudes. It was actually kind of disappointing. I mean,
we saw a lot of
players
club
breaking
throws,
stuff. I mean, just not
kicking
not
in
being
lockers.
Good sports at all. Yeah,
it was weird.
Yeah.
Not good.
Yeah.
Not good. Very bad example for younger golfers as they try to get to that point too. Also, the Stanley Cup, it's done. Congratulations to the Florida Panthers. They beat the Edmonton Oilers for the 2nd straight year, and that was on Tuesday night. They won the series 4-2. And let me just say outright, Oilers fans, if you're listening to this in Edmonton, we feel you. Losing 2 straight finals in a row. Micah, do you remember when the Rangers went to the World Series in 2010 and 2011 back to back?
Of course, I remember. Both? It's connected to some of the biggest trauma of my life.
God. Yeah,
when they
brutal.
lost in the World Series.
The Edmonton Oilers lost to the Florida Panthers twice in a row. At least with the Rangers, it was 2 different teams. This time, it was the same team. They
Sorry, Canada. Sorry, Canada. This was your chance to bring the Stanley Cup back. Like we talked about last week, there hasn't been an NHL team that's won the Stanley Cup since 1993 that's actually in Canada. And goodness, I just feel like Canada needed this one.
They really did.
Yeah.
And Micah, just to go back to our predictions from a couple weeks ago, you predicted that Edmonton would win in 5, completely just off base there.
Completely botched it. Yeah.
I predicted Florida would win in 7, but they did win in 6, so they were a little bit better than I was expecting.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we just got to say this because we've talked about it so many times. Trump is extending the executive order to keep TikTok alive for another 90 days while they try to negotiate some sort of deal, I guess. So it still lives on, even after we gave it a whole in memoriam back in January. Here we are 6 months later. Anyways,
here we
something to tune into is the NBA Finals because the Thunder are leading the series 3-2. Game 7 will be in Indianapolis at 8:30 p.m. Oh, sorry, Game 6, Indianapolis, Thursday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And that's going to be the Pacers just trying to claw their way back to force a Game 7, which would be played on Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Yep.
So we'll keep our eyes out on that. Yeah, anything else to add there, Micah?
Nope. That's. I mean, I'm a Mavericks fan. I'm happy for anybody who's a Thunder fan or a Pacers fan. I think this is just like a good series for the NBA, like good old classic team building from the Pacers and specifically from the Thunder. Sam Presti, the GM there, has just done a masterful job of stockpiling picks, making the right picks, and just building a team from the ground up rather than just all of these all-star acquisitions. It's actually a masterclass in how to build like a long-term stable championship team. Even though I'm not a Thunder fan, I can definitely respect that. All right, so let's jump into the mailbag before we wrap up. Okay, we want to continue to hear from you all. Send us your questions or thoughts or topic ideas to culturebrief@dennisonforum.org. So send us an email. But follow us on Instagram, too. We have an Instagram handle. We're pretty cool. @culturebriefpodcast. So Gary, our friend Gary from Tyler, emailed this into us. And here's what he said. This is a question for all the real men in all caps. That is men who do their own yards. So if you're a real man, you do your own yards, is what Gary's saying. We're not saying
He's coming in
Gary's
hot on this one. I
Gary's
hear you, Gary. I hear you.
I hear you, Gary, but it was Gary who said it. Okay. While weed eating, should I walk left to right or right to left? I have a strong opinion on this. Connor, what's yours?
Well, I feel like this is a very niche question, and also I don't have a strong opinion. I kind of go both ways. Just depends on which direction my fence line is. If I'm against the house, I don't know. It just kind of matters. Sometimes I'm trying to stay more in the shade. Actually, I guess that doesn't really affect if I walk left to right. Anyways, I don't have an opinion, but I would love to hear yours. Why do you care so much, Micah?
So it's all about what feels natural, right? So ultimately, I think next time you go and weed eat, guys, we're in the heat of the summer. So we're out there mowing our yards, doing what Gary would say, real man work, right? So when you're weed eating, when you're weed whacking, when you're doing that, think about what feels natural. I think it might, if you're right-handed or left-handed, that might make a difference. But as somebody who's right-handed, when I'm holding the trigger with my right hand and then stabilizing the weed eater with my left, it feels much more natural for me to go left to right as I'm weed eating. And so I'm realizing when he asked that question, I always weed eat from left to right. No matter what, I start at the same spot and I weed eat an edge in the exact same way, start at the same spot, end at the same spot, and I always go left to right.
What you guys can't see because you're only listening to this, but Micah just gave a whole demonstration with his hands and his movements on camera, and so I'm grateful for that. Micah, I gotta say, we have talked more about lawn on this podcast than I ever expected us to.
Yeah, man, people are keeping it alive, man.
They love the lawn talk. Maybe
I'm sure Connor's. We've had a lot of shorts, on X and Instagram and like different places. I'm sure Connor will find a way to maybe format that, and we can see if we can edit a weed eater into my hands or something like that. We'll
I don't know if I'm that.
So tune in for that.
AI.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for this week's episode of Culture Brief, a Denison Forum podcast. All articles and videos mentioned will be linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, and rate and review the show, and share it with a friend. We'll see you next Thursday.